In this lesson, we will be building out a new method on our blockchain data structure called getTransaction that will allow us to get a specific transaction by passing in a transaction ID. And we will use this new method inside of our transaction ID endpoint. So let's build out this new method now. So right here we will say blockchain.prototype.getTransaction equals a function that takes in a transaction ID. Cool. So this method is going to be very similar to this getBlock method, where we iterate through our entire chain and we set a flag equal to the correct transaction that we are looking for. So let's do that now. So the first thing we want to do is iterate through our entire blockchain. So we will say this.chain.for each block that's inside of our chain. We want to do some functionality in here. And actually, since we are looking for a transaction, we need to iterate through every single transaction on every block in our chain. So we need to do another for loop inside of here. So inside of here, we will say block, which is this current block that we are on every iteration of our for loop. So we will say block.transactions.for each transaction. Cool. So now we have access to every single transaction that is on our blockchain. And we simply want to compare the ID of every transaction to the ID that we are looking for. And if it's the correct ID, then we know we have found the correct transaction. So let's build this out now. So we will say if the current transaction that we are on dot transaction ID equals the transaction ID that we are looking for, then we want to do some functionality inside of here. So just like we did inside of our getBlock method, we want to set a flag to indicate that we have found the correct transaction inside of our getTransaction method. So at the top of this method, we will simply say let correct transaction equal null. And then inside of our if statement, if we have found the correct transaction, we will simply set correct transaction equal to the transaction that we are currently on. Easy as that. Now, just to make this method a little bit more useful, we're also going to want to send back the block that we can find this transaction in. So in order to do that, we will make another flag up here that says let correct block equal null. And then if we find the transaction we are looking for, we are simply going to set the correct block variable equal to the current block that we are on, which is this variable right here that we have access to from our outer for loop. Easy as that. And then finally, the last thing that we want to do is we want to return these two pieces of data. So at the bottom here, we will simply say return an object that has the transaction property equal to the correct transaction and the block property equal to the correct block. And that's it. That's our getTransaction method. Easy as that. So top to bottom, what we are doing in this method is we are searching for a specific transaction given its transaction ID. We are then iterating through every single block inside of our chain, and on top of that, we are iterating through every single transaction on each block. If we find the correct transaction that we are looking for, we are going to set our correct transaction variable, which is up here, equal to the transaction that we're on, and we are going to set our correct block variable equal to the block that we are on. Easy as that. We are then simply going to return the transaction that we are looking for and the block that that transaction can be found in. And if the transaction ID that we are looking for does not exist, then both of these variables will be null. So we will know that the transaction ID we are looking for does not exist. Easy as that. In the next lesson, we will be using this getTransaction method inside of our transaction ID endpoint. I'll see you in the next lesson.